Okay, when for you did music take over as your main focus and indeed become a career option for you?
It was always my focus from being the age of about 5 or 6 years old, actually. It always something that I really loved. I always remember my parents bought me a harmonica when I was very young, 5 or 6, and I could sort of immediately. I always see melodically music in sort of shapes and steps, and I could see that, so I could play it immediately, and it was always something that was my main interest right from the start. But when I was about 11. That was the first time I got interested in rock and roll, because up to that time I'd only really been interested in the classical music that my mother used to listen to, which was pretty sort of popular, sort of light romantic stuff, sort of Tchaikovsky and Grieg and everything. That's all I'd really heard. But I liked sort of a bit of popular music. But I got turned on really when I heard Elvis, when I heard Hound Dog. It just completely spanned me round, and that was the first time that I got really excited about rock and roll. And from that point onwards, my cousin was in a skiffle band, which was the first sort of self-made music in a rock and roll sort of format in those days. And he actually played a T-chest bass with a T-chest, a broom handle, and a string. And I remember seeing him at a local gig and being completely knocked out with that, and thinking, in some way or other, I've got to be up there doing that, as soon as I can. And it did lead to me really wanting to form a band from that point onwards. And I guess I was about 15 or 16 when I actually got the Zombies together, but it had been in my head for 2 or 3 years at that point. And really, as soon as the band was going, I wanted us to be professional if we possibly could. I mean, we went through our education, and I had a place at university, but I actually deliberately applied a year late so that I had the opportunity, if at all possible, of convincing the band to turn professional, which is what we eventually did. So really, I had my sights set on that from quite an early age.
Did you have a blueprint, exactly the type of band you wanted when you formed the Zombies, or did that sort of come with time?
No, that just came with time. I remember when I first saw Jim, my cousin, who was later the bass player with Argent, but when I saw him up on stage, I thought, at the time, I played piano, and at the time, you just had to use whatever pianos were there, and it was very guitar orientated. But I thought, even if I I'm just bashing away chords in the background, no one hears me, I don't care. That's really what I want to do, And but when the Zombies first formed, really the bands that were around were bands in England like the Shadows, Cliff Richard. It was just before the Beatles really came out in England, and I guess we were doing very much pop music of the time, just whatever was around. And all the rhythm and blues stuff and all that sort of thing really came through listening to the Beatles. Although I will say that a love of mine, even pre-Beatles in that early time, was Ray Charles. I did love Ray Charles, I must say. But generally we were doing, we didn't have a clear blueprint. We tended to be doing things like some Elvis songs, Cliff Richard songs. But even right from the beginning, I do remember that very unusually, and this is something we had in common with the Beatles, and probably a lot of bands in Liverpool, but we hadn't seen those. We used to have a mic set up at the back of the stage, and while Colin was singing lead, Chris and I would right from the beginning, we would sing harmonies through this mic. And down south, in the south of England as we were, that was very, very unusual.
Now,
but apart from that, really, we were just playing the music of the day until really the Beatles came along, which again was another revolution, and it opened our eyes, along with a lot of other people, it opened our eyes to a lot of black rhythm and blues, a lot of the Tamla stuff, Smokey Robinson and all that stuff that was going on, and we gradually formed our identity, through playing, I think.
Now, I believe your first recording deal came as a result of a band competition, a Battle of the Bands type competition. Is that right?
That's right.
You still have vivid memories of that gig?
Yeah. Oh, that was wonderful. I mean, in some ways, my favourite memories of my whole career are tied up with the couple of years that the Zombies were semi-pro before we actually turned professional. And the climax of that time really was that what you described. It was called the Hearts Beat competition, and it was in Watford, and the prize was a recording contract with Decca. And in fact, we were actually offered a recording contract after we won the heat, so we sort of knew that we had to keep it quiet. But it was fantastic. I mean, we built up a real reputation over the 2 years locally, and our audiences have got bigger and bigger. So that was very exciting. And then when the night came for the final, we couldn't believe it, because all these people had organised coaches and God knows what. It was a complete surprise to us, actually, how big the support was. And the hall was absolutely full with about 2,000 people. And it was like, to us, it was like Beatlemania, because here we were, a little semi-pro band, and, we were getting this sort of reaction in the final. And then to actually win it was, it was like, it was really like living in a dream world, to be quite honest. And it was that persuaded a couple of the other guys that they should, not go to university and stick with the band for a little while. And I was happy as anything.
Now, I believe She's Not There was only the second song that you wrote?
It was indeed, yeah.
Did you sense at that time that you'd hit on something special with that song?
Well, I did, but it really, you have to put it into context. I mean, I think there's one time in your life when you're so naive, you have so little knowledge of the pitfalls and what can go wrong. God knows, I know now, but, you just think that, you're so full of confidence, and that's such an asset at the beginning, I think. And we had a recording session coming up, and the guy that was producing it said, I think you should try and write something yourself. And I thought, yeah, I can write something that's as good as the Beatles hits that are around, and we'll rehearse it, it'll sound great, Conor will sing it beautifully, we'll record it, and of course, I mean, I couldn't see anything going wrong in the recording of it. It's all going to sound brilliant, and it's going to come out, and it's going to be a hit, and it's going to be a hit in America, and it was. And even though I was fantastically excited, I thought that was brilliant. I didn't imagine any other course. I just thought that's what happens. You write a song, it sounds great, it's a big hit, and that's the way of things, And it wasn't until something quite soon after things didn't go like that, I thought, hang on a minute, someone's torn the script up. This is not going right at all.
Looking back, how do you think you coped with the sudden success and stardom at such a young age?
I think in some ways, I think we were all pretty level-headed and we coped very well. I must say, looking back on my life, though, I do feel that when you get such instant success, and She's Not There went to #1 in America in the Cashbox charts in America, and this was, the Beatles had just opened the floodgates in America, and then we followed straight through, really. I do feel it arrests your development in a way, and I came off the road when I was 30, and in some ways I don't think I started to grow up, until I was 30, and in some ways I think it's a very bad thing for you to get a lot of celebrity and a lot of attention at that age, because it stops you maturing, and it stops you actually working, within the social area in life, and because you're always the centre of attention. Whenever you go into a restaurant, it's odds on that someone will recognise you or will have heard of you, so you get special attention. People, you don't have to always earn people's respect. It's sort of there at the beginning, and I think that's a very bad thing. So, but I mean, I don't think there's any way out of that, and I think you get the extreme versions of that sort of thing with someone like Michael Jackson, who I feel so sorry for, because it does distort you, and even in my small way, I found it distorting. I mean, for someone like Michael Jackson, or someone of or like Madonna or whatever, it must be a very bad thing in a way, and it really distorts you, I think. But as far as actually going mad, we didn't, and I always had a thing. I didn't mind what other people did. I wasn't a prude as far as drugs and things were concerned, but I took drugs. I always hated the idea of drugs. I've never taken a drug in my life, really. I've never even smoked, and it's something which I was never attracted to. I just wanted to, so in that way, I guess we sort of indulge ourselves with, when you're a young lad and all the girls want to know you. I mean, that's it's like a dream come true. It's brilliant. So we were pretty wild in some ways, but along with everybody else. But as far as actually, losing it completely, I don't think any of us did.
Have you ever been able to pin down a particular reason why the band seemed to enjoy greater success outside the UK than in your home country?
I have no idea. We had our own frustrations at the time. We always felt... one of the reasons that Odyssey and Oracle was ever recorded was because we were very frustrated with our record producers. We actually felt that the job they did on the first session when we recorded She's Not There, You Make Me Feel Good, Summertime, and It's All Right With Me, we thought they did a brilliant job on that and thought it sounded absolutely marvellous. But after that first session, we felt that the producer, instead of saying, okay, let's approach it exactly the same as the first session in the sense that we thought, let's get the most out of these songs, let's get it sound as exciting as possible. We felt that they said, okay, what made She's Not There successful? And in their opinion, because they said it was Colin's breathy vocals. So, I think Colin's got a marvellous voice, but there's a lot more to making a record than just trying to concentrate on one thing. And so in some of the subsequent records, I think they actually tried to manufacture an artificial sort of breathiness, and it took some of the balls out of the records for us, and that made us very frustrated. Sometimes we would record a single and be really excited about what was on tape, and the producer was quite autocratic. We were very young in those days, and he wouldn't let us stay for the mix. So he would mix it. We'd go down the pub. Everything was done very quickly in those days. The mix would only take a couple of hours. So we would come back from the pub a couple of hours later, and quite often we'd say, where's our track gone? That wasn't what we left. And we got very frustrated with this. And in fact, one of the main reasons we recorded Odyssey and Oracle, we knew we were probably going to break up. And we said we must produce something ourselves. Or Chris and I said we must have a go at least of trying to realise some of the ideas we've got before we break up. But, who knows if that's we still had hits in other countries even with that. Tell 'Er No was a top 5 hit in America. Time of the Season was the biggest hit we ever had, and it sold 2 million. And it's quite interesting that that Time of the Season did nothing in England, for instance, but it was included on one of the first rock compilation albums, and it became a big sort of cult hit from that. So it must have had the ability to be a hit. Maybe we just didn't get the plays or whatever at that time, but people did respond to it, and years later, even in this country, it's got a high profile.
Great was the temptation to get the band back together when you had that belated success with Time of the Season. Because by that stage, you were more or less getting Argent together, weren't you?
Well, that's right. For me, there was no temptation at all, because I've always felt that the only way to do something is if you've got total commitment and enthusiasm, and that's the only way you really make it work. And that was certainly the case with the Zombies. And when Colin said to me that he felt he was going to split, he was going to leave, that he wanted to move out of that world for a while, I was devastated. I didn't want the Zombies to split up at all. I thought, I was really upset. But having taken that decision and moved on to other things, I just didn't want to know about looking back. And it seemed to me that if everyone felt disillusioned with the band and whatever, and didn't feel committed enough to keep going and really try and make something happen, then the fact that we had a hit to get back together just to cream off the financial rewards without having behind it, the total commitment and enthusiasm, didn't feel right to me. So I always resisted that. There were quite strong pressures at the time to get back, because we were offered a lot of money, particularly in the States. But I can honestly say for me there was no temptation.
Did you find you had a better control of your career direction with Argent than what you did with the Zombies?
Well, it's funny, in some ways, yes. In some ways, very, very much more. But looking back on it now, the last 15 years has actually seen a lot of upsurge in the Zombies stuff, in people's opinion of the band, in fact in sales. We've really sold a lot of records over the last 15 years. Odyssey and Oracle, for instance, which didn't sell at all when it first came out, really sells in very healthy numbers now, and it has, and it's now reviewed. Each review is better and better, and some of the reviews of the Zombies anthology have put Odyssey and Oracle alongside Pet Sounds and Revolver, and goodness knows what. And I think one of the reasons for that is that the way our organisation was controlled in the early days, we may have had our differences of opinion with our producers, but they said what you should do is not sign with a record company. They said we should sign a production deal. So we make the tapes and then lease them to the record companies, and then they revert to us, which is what we did. And it's because of that that we own all our tracks, the Zombies, and it's because of that that Carol Broughton, this lady in England who looks after the publishing company, her own publishing company, which publishes the stuff, but also she's created a huge sort of growing sort of groundswell of activity for the Zombies, which has really built something smashing up, And with Argent, that's been impossible because Sony own the stuff in perpetuity, and they don't really work it very much. I mean, we're very small fish to such a big company as them. And if we could get our hands on those, Carol could do a similar thing, and that's a frustration to me. So, in one way, I felt that at the time we were recording with Argent, we had total control over our mixes, where we recorded, what we wanted to do. We had a lot of freedom, and in some ways, we had much more control. But in other organisational ways, we never owned the tapes, and all these many years onwards, it's a real frustration not to be able to do anything with them. So it's a two-edged sword, really.
Now, I believe Hold Your Head Up was never originally intended to be released as a single. I think you weren't too keen on releasing singles at all at that stage.
That's true. I mean, in those, it got to a point where it had become very uncool to be a singles band. There was a sort of divide between being an album band and a singles band at the time, and a lot of bands stopped. If you thought that you were hip at all, you didn't release singles, and therefore we didn't release a single. And the reason why Hold Your Head Up came out was because we were supposed to release an album in time for a tour, which we didn't have ready, and the record company said, well, listen, you've got to have something out there. For once they put their foot down, and said, it's crazy, you can't tour without any product. So they said, we're going to make an EP, an extended play record, and it's not going to be a single. They said, we're going to put the full version of Hold Your Head Up out, which is 6.5 minutes, or 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes, and 2 other tracks on it, and it'll be like a mini album. We said, well, okay. So that came out, and then Alan Freeman, the DJ in England, just kept playing. He had a program every week, and he played every week. He played Hold Your Head Up, the full version, and this resulted in enough sales for this EP for it to be just under the bottom of the chart. And the record company said, look, we think we've got a hit here. And while we were in Holland and away from the country, they took the record, as they actually technically had a right to do. They cut out 3 minutes, which was in fact my 3-minute organ solo, and the record immediately just crossed the great divide from being just under the charts to just into the charts, and then we had the opportunity to go on Top of the Pops. Now, we didn't know what to do then, because we thought this is a real crunch decision, because Led Zeppelin, won't put singles out. Many bands wouldn't put singles out. It was so uncool to do so. But in the end, we said, sod it, we'll do it. And we did Top of the Pops, and from that point onwards, the record went crazy. I mean, the next day it sold huge numbers of copies, leapt up the charts, and it was a big hit. And actually, from that time onwards, it started to become cool again for people to have singles. So I really actually felt, against our will, we became a bit of trendsetters.
Now, I read where you now feel it may have been more appropriate for Argent to wind up after Russ left.
I feel that, yeah. Yeah.
What was the main impetus at the time then to keep it going?
Only because we felt there was so much good still in the band. Russ had some problems, he'd had a bit of a breakdown as well, and he left. But we were hanging on to what was good there, and I can understand that. But but the other side of the coin, in Retrospectives, I believe that each band actually has a natural sort of cycle. And, you know, a lot of bands today, I think, have gone well past it. A lot of the old bands, you know, should have given up ages ago. And that's why I think it's wrong to continue just for commercial reasons. But, you know, I think that really our natural cycle had come to a point where we maybe should have split up rather than continue it for another year and a half, which is what we did. But we were actually trying to hang on to the good things in the band. That was the only reason, really. We just didn't want to let it go. I can't really say any more than that.
I believe you did some writing with Russ recently.
I did. It was great. Yeah. All the times when we were in the band, when Argent were together, I feel that our best two albums were our first two, which were our least successful commercially before we had a hit. I think that looking back on it all and listening to it, I think that Argent and Ring of Hands, you know, sound great. And I think that's when we were most together as a band. I think that after that, for whatever reasons, and because we were a lot younger as well, I think Russ and I became a bit polarised in our views. And, you know, the band started to lose some of its unity. But anyway, for whatever reason, Russ and I never wrote together while we were in the band. And recently, just through a strange set of circumstances, we found ourselves playing together, and in fact even Argent reformed for a couple of charity things, which it's a long story, but it just happened just from a series of coincidences, and it was such a buzz playing back together again. It felt so good because everybody is a better player now than we were then. You know, everybody's better now, and I think we had some pretty good gigs then, but it sounded great. And there are plans afoot for us perhaps to actually even do a little bit of touring next year, just on a small scale, maybe a couple of weeks in America, maybe a little bit of recording. But anyway, Russ and I got together for the first time just before Christmas, and we wrote 2 or 3 songs together, and it was great. I loved it, and it was really easy, and I actually feel, you know, we're much more on the same wavelength now, and I actually feel that if Argent did get back together, it wouldn't be for a huge you know, career opportunity. It would be because we would just really enjoy playing together again, and in a relaxed way doing something creative. I mean, we might do a bit of writing and some new tracks, and that would be brilliant. And I feel that these years on, not only are we better players, I think we've got, you know, more maturity in the way we think about things, and I think it could be something that would be really nice to do.
Absolutely. Now, you threw yourself into a lot of session work after the split of Argent. You played with a wide variety of artists. How important was that for you in terms of your growth as a musician to do that?
It was very important to me at the time. I actually felt, I mean, that was another reason why Argent actually finally split up, was that, you know, well, one reason was that we'd actually come back from an American tour and lost some money, and I thought, this is crazy. But another reason was that I'd had a few offers to do things which really interested me musically, but I had to say no because, you know, when you're in a band, you're committed to it. And I thought, I was 30 years old, and I thought, I really, you know, as much as you like the guys that you're playing with, I really felt that it would be good for me to broaden my base and actually have a broader canvas, just to see, you know, where I could go, or I did feel restricted, and that's no reflection on the guys. It's just I really felt the need to broaden things, and what I decided to do was, for a year, I thought, well, look, I've got enough money to exist for a year. You know, I mean, I've got a sort of fairly big house and everything, so I had to look at the outgoings and everything. But I thought, for a year, I'm not going to try and put anything together myself. But anything interesting that's offered to me, I'll just follow it up and see what happens. And that's what I did. And it was great. And for a while, I mean, I did the session work I was offered, not only with people like The Who, Roger Daltrey, you know, Gary Moore, Andrew Lloyd Webber, or whatever, but you know, if someone asked me to do a television session or playing an orchestral session, I did that as well. And it was a great experience for me, and I think it was very important for me at the time. But then there came a time a couple of years later when I found myself doing things which I really didn't want to do, and you know, like a television session with music that I didn't like, and having to travel 2 hours to get there. And I suddenly thought, what am I doing? You know, this has lasted long enough now, and I knocked the session work on the head, really. Although I still did things for, things that were really interesting, or people that asked me to do something interesting, like the Andrew Lloyd Webber stuff or whatever, I'd still do that. But generally speaking, I stopped the session work then. But all the influences, all the sort of things that I was offered were important for me at the time, and I really got to grips with, learning to sight read. I thought, well, I think I'm a pretty good musician, but I'm 30 and I can't really sight read that well. And so I just sat down at the piano for 2 hours every day and put anything that was I had it up in front of me, and no matter how slowly or how long it took me to work my way through a piece, I'd do it, And at the end of a year, it was unrecognisable improvement. So it was part of a whole process that I felt that I needed to develop a little bit.
Production's another field you've got into in recent years. Being a recording artist yourself, do you think that's helped you as a producer in terms of understanding the needs of the artists that you're working with?
I think it has, yeah. I mean, I think it's always important to have some sort of understanding of the pressures that you feel when you're in front of the microphone or recording yourself. And in fact, in all the production that I've done, myself and my colleague, it's been mostly with Peter Van Hook, who was the drummer with Van Morrison for many years. And he's a fine musician, actually. I'm just rambling on, I've lost my thread.
That's all right.
You were saying, is it important to... Yeah, and that both of us have actually performed on most of the records that we've made. And that's important to me because when you make a record, it's about 3.5 months out of your life, 3 months, 2.5 months out of your life. And I actually do need some sort of playing or some sort of input into the performance side of most of the things that we find ourselves doing, because I think I'd go mad otherwise. I mean, I do seem to need that. I don't think Peter does particularly, but I certainly do. But I think it is a great help. I think having been an artist and continuing to perform and record, it does give you an insight into the pressures that people feel when they're recording, yeah.
What would be the one key element you always look for to get a good production?
I think it's essential not to go in there thinking you've got to make the thing sound good. I mean, of course, that's a byproduct. You do have to make the thing sound good. But I think the most important thing is to think right from the start, what is this artist? What have they got about their voice, about their writing, and how can I bring out what's essentially there, the absolute, the most that you can bring out that quality. I think that is the essential aspect of recording, because it's quite easy to say build up a backing track which sounds glorious, but which may not have a lot to do with what the artist is or what his song's all about. And I think that is the greatest mistake. I think the best productions actually draw out of what is actually already in the artist. I think that's by far the most important thing.
Now, just before we wind up, I believe I want to talk about what you're up to these days. I believe you've released an album of classical material.
I have. That's been a really exciting thing for me. I've always listened to classical music. I mean, even when I was into Elvis for the first time, I didn't stop listening to classical music. And when I was first listening to the Beatles, I would still love, well, I would also listen to Miles Davis, actually, and be passionate about Miles and a lot of jazz. So I've never stopped listening to those things, but I never thought of myself as being, I never thought that classical music was a path that would ever be open to me as a performer. And it was only because there's a very fine percussionist who plays with a lot of leading orchestras, who's a great friend of mine, who persuaded me that I should apply myself more to that. And I gradually put my toe in the water, and I really got hooked. And I thought, well, I'm really going to try and make an album of piano music that I love. I didn't want to put any restrictions on myself for technique. In other words, I didn't want to say, I would love to hear this piece on an album, but I can't play it. Within reason. I mean, there were one or two pieces that I don't feel that I yet can get close to. But, with those apart, I just wanted to put together an album that reflected my interests and enthusiasms with piano pieces. And at the same time, I also wanted to have two or three of my own compositions on there, and in the end I composed three things of my own. And I'm very proud of actually having achieved it, and I'm hooked now, and I really want to try and carry that on, and I want to do some live performances as well.
Oh,
so that's been a very exciting thing for me.
There are plans to take that on the road.
I would love to, and in fact, I was talking to there's a jazz saxophonist that you may have heard of. They're a couple actually. They're sort of veteran jazz couple in this country called John Dankworth and Cleo Lane.
Oh, yeah.
And John runs a theatre called The Stables, which is quite famous in this country, and he's asked me to put an evening together which will include me playing some classical things, some solo classical things, also maybe something with maybe a Bach keyboard concerto with a string quartet or something, but also some jazz, and we may actually bring Argent on for the second half. So that's the sort of thing which I'd love to do. I'd not necessarily always bring Argent on, but I'd love to go on stage, and I see no reason at all not to play, some classical music that I love, some jazz as well, a couple of Duke Ellington things, and some of my own compositions as well. And I'd really love to try and forge, something unusual and original in that area. That's what I'm looking to try and do.
Has it been a problem at all for you over the years with your solo work being compared to your past work with the Zombies and Argent?
I don't think so. I mean, with the solo work, it's been very interesting for me because I always used to sing backup, with both those bands. When I did my first solo album, it was a shock to me how weak I felt my voice was. And in fact, I then went away and worked a lot on it. And I think it's 10 times as strong now as it was then. And so that's quite interesting. But no, it's never bothered me, people comparing things, because I know, with this classical album, for instance, I'm actually amazingly proud that I think I've actually got something that really is musical and works, and that's quite an achievement, I think, being self-taught and actually just coming from nowhere doing that. And that to me is the important thing. I know what I feel about it. I don't think it's perfect by any means, and I wish actually at the moment I could record the whole thing all over again. but of course you can't. But nevertheless, no matter how people review it, I know what I think about it, and that's the most important thing, really. I mean, in actual fact, I haven't had many responses yet to it, but I had the most wonderful email from somebody who said that he got the album, and and he'd just been going through a horrible period. His mother had just died and everything, and he was saying it's just made me feel totally different. And I thought, my God, if you can actually affect one person that way, it's worth being a musician.
It makes it worthwhile, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does.
Okay, Rod, just before we finish up, what else is on your agenda for the upcoming months?
Well, I've tried to withdraw from production commitments at the moment because I really want to give this this piano playing thing a shot, and that means a lot of practice. And so I've tried to clear my agenda quite a bit. I've tried to set up something whereby there's a couple of projects that my colleague in production, Peter Van Hook, is where we would normally produce together. He's actually going to produce an artist. We're trying this out. He's going to produce. He's going to do it in my studio, and I'm going to be around to play some keyboards, do some string arrangement, and also give him some opinions if he feels he needs them. But I don't feel that I have to be there all the time, so it will give me time to actually practice and see if I can sort something out that way. So I've tried to clear some space. And also, if we get this Argent project off the ground, it would involve some re-recording of some stuff, which I can't really tell you the details of at the moment, but until it happens. But that would be on the agenda as well, if that can be brought together. And also there's a little bit of writing for television that I've been asked to do, which wouldn't be it wouldn't be me committing too much of my time, and that would be about it. And I would really try and and get this piano idea on the road, which is very hard, but incredibly rewarding to do.
Well, the best of luck with all that, and thank you very much for your time today, Rod. It's been an absolute treat talking to you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Can I ask, is it allowed to tell people what my website is?
By all means, go right ahead.
It's www.rodargent.com, and it's the only way at the moment that you can get my Rod Argent Classically Speaking album, because it's it's only available at the moment on the internet. I'm just exploring that to see, if we can make that work.
Oh, terrific.
There's my commercial.
Well, when this goes to air, I'll make sure I throw that in a few more times as well to make sure everyone gets it.
Oh, that's very kind of you, John.
Thanks for many years of wonderful music, Rod. All the best.
Oh, thank you very much.
Maybe we'll see you down under someday in the future as well.
Oh, I really hope so.
Okay. Take care, Rod. Thanks a lot. Ta-da.
Bye-bye.